Ready to finish the book? For reals? Jessica's gonna read. It's gonna be a little bit longer than 10 minutes, but we're with that. So we're on 238 for me.
I'm going to say a prayer.
Oh, we should do that. Okay.
That's okay. Our dearest Father in heaven, we are so very grateful for all the wonderful things that we have been exposed to as we've been reading this book, and for the opportunity we have now to learn a little bit more about the author, and throughout the rest of our lives to have this resource to come back to refresh ourselves, to improve and grow, that we may become more like thee, that we may care more and understand more for others and of others, and that we might just be successful in building strong and lasting relationships and in being the kind of person that thou would have us be. Pray for thy spirit to be with us as we continue to learn and grow, that our hearts and minds may be open, and that the truths may sink deep into who we are, and that we may take them out into the world and use them today to build our businesses and to strengthen our families and help people feel great. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. So glad you're on track.
You seem very down to business today.
Yes, I am. I've
Good.
been getting stuff done this morning.
All right. Awesome. All right, I don't remember where we left off.
That these people.
The fact that these people. Okay. Yeah. The fact that these people, 10 or 20 years after leaving grade school, high school, or college, come and take this training is a glaring commentary on the shocking deficiencies of our educational system. What do adults really want to study? That is an important question. And in order to answer it, the University of Chicago, the American Association for Adult Education, and the United YMCA Schools made a survey over a 2-period year. The survey revealed that the prime interest of adults is health. It also revealed that their second interest is in developing skill in human relationships. They want to learn the technique of getting along with and influencing other people. They don't want to become public speakers, and they don't want to listen to a lot of high-sounding talk about psychology. They want suggestions they can use immediately in business, in social contacts, and in home. No wonder we love our jobs so much.
Yep, because so fulfilling.
Well, it's health and human relationships.
Yeah.
The top 2 things that adults really want to learn and grow in.
Yeah. And I bet number 3 is money.
I bet it is. I bet it is. So that was what adults wanted to study, was it? All right, said the people making the survey. Fine. If that is what they want, we'll give it to them. Looking around for a textbook, they discovered that no working manual had ever been written to help people solve their daily problems in human relationships. Here was a fine kettle of fish. For hundreds of years, learned volumes had been written on Greek and Latin and higher mathematics, epics about which the average adult doesn't give 2 hoots, but on the one subject on which he has a thirst for knowledge, a veritable passion for guidance and help, nothing. This explains the presence of 2,500 eager adults crowding into the grand ballroom of the Hotel Pennsylvania in response to a newspaper advertisement. Here, apparently, at last, was the thing for which they had been long seeking. Back in high school and college, they had pored over books, believing that knowledge alone was the open sesame to financial and professional rewards. But a few years in the rough and tumble of business and professional life had brought sharp disillusionment. They had seen some of the most important business successes won by men who possessed, in addition to their knowledge, the ability to talk well, to win people to their way of thinking, and to sell themselves and their ideas. They soon discovered that if one aspired to wear the captain's cap and navigate the ship of business, personality and the ability to talk are more important than a knowledge of Latin, verbs, or a sheepskin from Harvard. The advertisement in the New York Sun promised that the meeting would be highly entertaining. It was. 18 people who had taken the course were marshaled in front of the loudspeaker, and 15 of them were given precisely 75 seconds each to tell his or her story. Only 75 seconds of talk. Then bang went the gavel, and the chairman shouted, "Time, next speaker." The affair moved with the speed of a herd of buffalo thundering across the plains. Spectators stood for an hour and a half to watch the performance. The speakers were a cross-section of life. Several sales representatives, a chain store executive, a baker, the president of a trade association, two bankers, an insurance agent, an accountant, a dentist, an architect, a druggist who had come from Indianapolis to New York to take the course, a lawyer who had come from Havana in order to prepare himself to give one important 3-minute speech. The first speaker bore the Gaelic name Patrick J. O'Hare. Born in Ireland, he attended school for only 4 years, drifted to America, worked as a mechanic, then as a chauffeur. Now, however, he was 40. He had a growing family and needed more money, so he tried selling trucks. Suffering from an inferiority complex that, as he put it, was eating his heart out, he had to walk up and down in front of an office half a dozen times before he could summon up enough courage to open the door. He was so discouraged as a salesman that he was thinking of going back to working with his hands in a machine shop when one day he received a letter inviting him to an organization meeting of the Dale Carnegie course in effective speaking. He didn't want to attend. He feared he would have to associate with a lot of college graduates, that he would be out of place. His despairing wife insisted that he go, saying, "It may do you some good, Pat. God knows you need it." He went down to the place where the meeting was to be held and stood on the sidewalk for 5 minutes before he could generate enough self-confidence to enter the room. The first few times he tried to speak in front of the others, he was dizzy with fear. But as the weeks drifted by, he lost all fear of audiences and soon found that he loved to talk. The bigger the crowd, the better. And he also lost his fear of individuals and of his superiors. He presented his ideas to them, and soon he had been advanced into the sales department. He had become a valued and much liked member of his company. This night in the Hotel Pennsylvania, Patrick O'Hare stood in front of 2,500 people and told a gay, rollicking story of his achievements. Wave after wave of laughter swept over the audience. Few professional speakers could have equaled his performance. The next speaker, Godfrey Meyer, was a gray-headed banker, the father of 11 children. The first time he had attempted to speak in class, he was literally struck dumb. His mind refused to function. His story is a vivid illustration of how leadership gravitates to the person who can talk. He worked on Wall Street, and for 25 years, he had been living in Clifton, New Jersey. During that time, he had taken no active part in community affairs and knew perhaps 500 people. Shortly after he enrolled in the Carnegie course, he received his tax bill and was infuriated by what he considered unjust charges. Ordinarily, he would have sat at home and fumed, or he would have taken it out in grousing to his neighbors. But instead, he put on his hat that night, walked into the town meeting, and blew off steam in public. As a result of that talk of indignation, the citizens of Clifton, New Jersey, urged him to run for the town council. So for weeks, he went from one meeting to another, denouncing waste and municipal extravagance. There were 96 candidates in the field. When the ballots were counted, lo, Godfrey Meyer's name led all the rest. Almost overnight, he had become a public figure among the 40,000 people in his community. As a result of his talks, he made 80 times more friends in 6 weeks than he had been able to previously in 25 years. And his salary as councilman meant that he got a return of 1,000% a year on his investment in the Carnegie course. The third speaker, the head of a large national association of food manufacturers, told how he had been unable to stand up and express his ideas at meetings of the board of directors. As a result of learning to think on his feet, 2 astonishing things happened. He was soon made president of his association, and in that capacity, he was obliged to address meetings all over the United States. Excerpts from his talks were put on the Associated Press wires and printed in newspapers and trade magazines throughout the country. In the 2 years after learning to speak more effectively, he received more free publicity for his company and its products than he had been able to get previously with $250,000 spent in direct advertising. The speaker admitted that he had formerly hesitated to telephone some of the more important business executives in Manhattan and invite them to lunch with him. But as a result of the prestige he had acquired by his talks, the same people telephoned him and invited him to lunch and apologized to him for encroaching on his time. The ability to speak is the ability to speak is a shortcut to distinction. It puts a person in the limelight, raises one head and shoulders above the crowd, and the person who can speak acceptably is usually given credit for an ability out of all proportion to what he or she really possesses. A movement for adult education has been sweeping over the nation, and the most spectacular force in the movement was Dale Carnegie, a man who listened to and critiqued more talks by adults than has any other man in captivity. According to a cartoon by Believe It or Not Ripley, he has criticized 150,000 speeches. If that grand total doesn't impress you, remember that it meant one talk for almost every day that has passed since Columbus discovered America. Or to put it in other words, if all the people who had spoken before him had used only 3 minutes and had appeared before him in succession, it would have taken 10 months listening day and night to hear them all.
If you get tired of talking and you want me to take a turn, just let me know.
Okay.
That's kind of
Dale Carnegie's own career, filled with sharp contrasts, was a striking example of what a person can accomplish when obsessed with an original idea and afire with enthusiasm. Born on a Missouri farm 10 miles from a railway, he never saw a streetcar until he was 12 years old. Yet by the time he was 46, he was familiar with the far-flung corners of the earth, everywhere from Hong Kong to Hammerfest, and at one time he approached closer to the North Pole than Admiral Byrd's headquarters at Little America was to the South Pole. This Missouri lad had once picked strawberries and cut cockleburrs for 5 cents an hour, became the highly paid trainer of the executives of large corporations in the art of self-expression. This erstwhile cowboy, who had once punched cattle and branded calves and ridden fences out in the western South Dakota, later went to London to put on shows under the patronage of the royal family. This chap, who was a total failure the first half dozen times he tried to speak in public, later became my personal manager. Much of my success has been due to training under Dale Carnegie. Young Carnegie had to struggle for an education, for hard luck was always battering away at the old farm in northwest Missouri with a flying tackle and a body slam. Year after year, the 102 River rose and drowned the corn and swept away the hay. Season after season, the fat hogs sickened and died from cholera. The bottom fell out of the market for cattle and mules, and the bank threatened to foreclose the mortgage. Sick with discouragement, the family sold out and bought another farm near the State Teachers College at Warrenburg, Missouri. Board and room could be had in town for $1 a day, but young Carnegie couldn't afford it. So he stayed on the farm and commuted on horseback 3 miles to college each day. At home, he milked the cows, cut the wood, fed the hogs, and studied his Latin verbs by the light of a coal oil lamp until his eyes blurred and began to nod. Even when he got to bed at midnight, he set the alarm for 3 o'clock. His father bred pedigree Dock Jersey hogs, and there was danger during the bitter cold nights that the young pigs would freeze to death. So they were put in a blanket, covered with a gunny sack, and set behind the kitchen stove. True to their nature, the pigs demanded a hot meal at 3 a.m. So when the alarm went off, Dale Carnegie crawled out of the blankets, took the basket of pigs out to their mother, waited for them to nurse, and then brought them back to the warmth of the kitchen stove. There were 600 students in State Teachers College, and Dale Carnegie was one of the isolated half dozen who couldn't afford to board in town. He was ashamed of the poverty that made it necessary for him to ride back to the farm and milk the cows every night. He was ashamed of his coat, which was too tight, and his trousers, which were too short. Rapidly developing an inferiority complex, he looked about for some shortcut to distinction. He soon saw that there were certain groups in college that enjoyed influence and prestige, the football and baseball players, and the chaps who won the debating and public speaking contests. Realizing that he had no flair for athletics, he decided to win one of the speaking contests. He spent months preparing his talks. He practiced as he sat in the saddle, galloping to college and back. He practiced his speeches as he milked the cows, and then he mounted a bale of hay in the barn and with great gusto and gestures harangued the frightened pigeons about the issues of the day. But in spite of all his earnestness and preparation, he met with defeat after defeat. He was 18 at the time, sensitive and proud. He became so discouraged, so depressed, that he even thought of suicide. And then suddenly he began to win. Not one contest, but every speaking contest in college. Other students pleaded with him to train them, and they won also. After graduating from college, he started selling correspondence courses to ranchers among the sand hills of western Nebraska and eastern Wyoming. In spite of all his boundless energy and enthusiasm, he couldn't make the grade. He became so discouraged that he went to his hotel room in Alliance, Nebraska in the middle of the day, threw himself across the bed, and wept in despair. He longed to go back to college. He longed to retreat from the harsh battle of life, but he couldn't. So he resolved to go to Omaha and get another job. He didn't have the money for a railroad ticket, so he traveled on a freight train, feeding and watering 2 carloads of wild horses in return for his passage. After landing in South Omaha, he got a job selling bacon and soap and lard for Armour and Company. His territory was up among the Badlands and the cow and Indian country of western South Dakota. All right, your turn.
Okay. I just want to say real quick, I think it's really interesting that the people that succeed are the people who have the biggest hardships. I mean,
Right?
it's pretty obvious. Like from the Align retreat that Brooke did, like every single speaker had overcome these huge discouragements or tragedies, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like if we want to be amazing, we should be running towards our trials. You know what I mean? It's just so funny. Okay. We're on. Where are we? I just lost
He
it.
covered his territory.
He covered his territory. Hold on, I'm gonna find it.
Okay.
In the middle of the thing, huh? There it is. Okay. He covered his territory by freight train and stagecoach and horseback, and slept in pioneer hotels where the only partition between the rooms was a sheet of muslin. He studied books on salesmanship, rode bucking broncos, played poker with the Indians, and learned how to collect money. And when, for example, an inland storekeeper couldn't pay cash for the bacon and hams he had ordered, Dale Carnegie would take a dozen pairs of shoes off his shelf, sell the shoes to the railroad men, and forward the receipts to Armour and Company. He would often ride a freight train 100 miles a day. When the train stopped to unload freight, he would dash uptown, see 3 or 4 merchants. I think it's merchants probably, get his orders, and when the whistle blew, he would dash down the street again, lickety split, and swing onto the train while it was moving. Within 2 years, he had taken an unproductive territory that had stood in the 25th place and had boosted it to first place among all the 29 car routes leading out of South Omaha. Armour and Company offered to promote him, saying, "You have achieved what seemed impossible." But he refused the promotion and resigned, went to New York, studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and toured the country playing the role of Dr. Hartley and Polly of the Circus. That's so funny. He just does all kinds of things. He never quits, right? He would never be a Booth or a Barrymore. He had the good sense to recognize that. So back he went to sales work, selling automobiles and trucks for the Packard Motor Car Company. He knew nothing about machinery and cared nothing about it. Dreadfully unhappy, he had to scourge himself to his task each day. He longed to have time to study, to write the books he had dreamed about writing back in college. So he resigned. He was going to spend his days writing stories and novels and support himself by teaching in a night school. Teaching what? As he looked back and evaluated his college work, he saw that his training in public speaking had done more to give him confidence, courage, poise, and the ability to meet and deal with people in business than had all the rest of his college courses put together. So he urged the YMCA schools in New York to give him a chance to conduct courses in public speaking for people in business. What? Make orators out of business people? Absurd. The YMCA people knew. They had tried such courses and they had always failed. When they refused to pay him a salary of $2 a night, he agreed to teach on a commission basis and take a percentage of the net profits, if there were any profits to take. And inside of 3 years, they were paying him $30 a night on that basis instead of so smart. The course grew. Otherwise heard of it than other cities. Dale Carnegie soon became a glorified circuit rider covering New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and later London and Paris. All the textbooks were too academic and impractical for the business people who flocked to his courses. Because of this, he wrote his own book entitled Public Speaking and Influencing Men in Business. It became the official text of all the YMCAs, as well as the American Bankers Association and the National Credit Men's Association. Dale Carnegie claimed that all people can talk when they get mad. He said that if you hit the most ignorant man in town on the jaw and knock him down, he would get on his feet and talk with an eloquence, heat, and emphasis that would have rivaled the world famous orator William Jennings Bryan at the height of his career. He claimed that almost any person can speak acceptably in public if he or she has self confidence and an idea that is boiling and stewing within. The way to develop self confidence, he said, is to do the thing you fear to do and get a record of successful experiences behind you. So he forced each class member to talk at every session of the course. The audience is sympathetic. They are all in the same boat, and by constant practice, they develop a courage, confidence, and enthusiasm that carry over into their private speaking. Dale Carnegie would tell you that he made a living all these years, not by teaching public speaking, that was incidental. That didn't make sense. Okay. His main job was to help people conquer their fears and develop courage. Ooh, I love that. He started out at first, I feel like we do that, honestly, with this business. A lot of people who have fears. He started out at first to conduct merely a course in public speaking, but the students who came were businessmen and women. Many of them hadn't seen the inside of a classroom in 30 years. Most of them were paying their tuition on the installment plan. They wanted results, and they wanted them quick. Results that they could use the next day in business interviews and in speaking before groups. So he was forced to be swift and practical. Consequently, he developed a system of training that is unique, a striking combination of public speaking, salesmanship, human relations, and applied psychology. A slave to no hard and fast rules, he developed a course that is as real as the measles and twice as much fun. When the classes terminated, the graduates formed clubs of their own and continued to meet fortnightly for years afterward. One group of 19 in Philadelphia met twice a month during the winter season for 17 years. Class members frequently travel 50 or 100 miles to attend classes. One student used to commute each week from Chicago to New York. Professor William James of Harvard used to say that the average person develops only 10% of his latent mental ability. Dale Carnegie, by helping businessmen and women to develop their latent possibilities, created one of the most significant movements in adult education. Lowell Thomas, 1936. I love that we read that because, I mean, that just shows like what an amazing man this author was. You know,
Right.
so much grit and so much like, you know, to us it might look like, oh my gosh, like he never succeeded at anything until, you know, like he tried so many different things. But that's honestly like that's the whole thing of like failure equals like when you get up from failure, that's where you succeed, you know. And he like tried his best at everything. So,
There's like a whole list of books back here.
I know, it's crazy, right? His books. He has a lot of books. How to Stop Worrying and Start Living.
Enrich Your Life the Dale Carnegie Way by Arthur R. Pell.
I'm like, I want to take a Dale Carnegie.
I know. I was looking, they have these courses back here. I'm like, yeah, let's do that.
I think they do. I mean, because Angie McGrew, she was saying she took the course, and I don't know. We'll have to ask her.
Well, if you're interested, details on when and where, write Dale Carnegie and Associates Inks. So I bet you could get online and find it now online. No.
This does have a website. It's www.dalecarnegie.com. It has a little.
Where are you seeing that? Oh, mine doesn't have that.
You're just too old. It was before the internet.
Mine is too old. Mine is the one that was published when I was born. No, I don't know.
Well, thanks for watching, y'all. And it was a lot longer. I just wanted to get it done on a Friday because that feels good.
Wrap it up.
Wrap it up. Thanks, y'all. Bye.